Hello and welcome back to the second round of discussions on this sort of Academy review with our good friend Academy Arena United. Good to have you back. We had great reception to the
Thank
last
you.
one. People really liked
You
it.
did.
So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it too. Did you? Was it good for you? Did you like getting to come on and do that?
Yeah, it was really good. Glad that we got to speak for that amount of time. Yeah, looking forward to it again this week.
Brilliant. Yeah, and so I think we'll plan to keep it going, and we'll just update it and and all of that. And that's what we want to do today. The academy's back in action. A couple games over the weekend, a game
Mm.
today. We want to talk about that. Talk about Chido Obi Martin in particular. There's some things you wanted to go on there, as well as talk
Yeah.
about Kone. So let's get into the recap of what happened and over the weekend with the games, and go for it.
Well, I bring you positive news over the weekend. Um,
Okay.
After the disaster of the first team on Saturday, was it Sunday? Was it Saturday or Sunday? I can't remember now.
Sunday
The
early,
first team
right?
game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Um, so across the weekend, every academy side from under 15s to under 21s won on the weekend. So the under 15s beat Man City 2-1. Someone called Kai Rooney scored.
Who's
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. Who's that? So he scored. JJ Gabriel, who's someone who I'm really looking forward to coming through the academy. He's a young kid, but very, very talented. He's just come back from injury. He's been out with a shoulder injury for quite some time. He came back on that game, so I'm looking forward to seeing him. He might be someone that we see for the under 18s perhaps towards the end of the season potentially. So the under 15s won, the under 16s beat Derby 5-0. So that was great. And then obviously the under 18s won in the FA Youth Cup 5-2 against Preston. And of course the
Right.
21s, the 21s beat Aston Villa on the weekend 2-1 as well. So all in all, it was a really, really good weekend for the academy from all age groups. So that's great to see.
Yeah, and I know that the under 18 ones was interesting because it seemed like they kicked off really well, but then second half wasn't so good, and they still kind of made it
Yeah.
through. What was your take on that game then? What kind of
So
happened there?
going into the game, I wouldn't say I was pessimistic, but I had sort of slight reservations about it, just because Preston had beaten Liverpool quite convincingly in the game before ours. So Preston knocked out
Okay.
Liverpool in the game prior to ours. Now Liverpool this season are doing horrendously bad in the under 18s league. They haven't necessarily got that strong of a team, so they're not sort of one of the big hitters in that league. But
Okay.
it's still a very impressive result, considering Preston's um, you know, club size and whatever, and the resources they've got for the academy and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, and also last season, the under 18s got knocked out very early in the FA Youth Cup by sort of a lower level side. So I was just sort of a bit cautious as to whether or not they'll be playing on their mind a little bit. But they started really, really well.
Okay.
Obviously, in terms of the drop off in the second half, I think perhaps what it was Preston maybe felt that they showed us a bit too much respect in that first 45 minutes. I felt that kind of they played a bit within themselves and the occasion got to them a little bit. And I think in that second half, perhaps the manager said to them, like, you guys have got a chance here. And obviously they came back into the game, but obviously it was too much in the end. And the performance was good, and especially with the amount of players that we've got injured as well. So Biancheri was out, Shea Lacey was out, Bendita Mantata was out. So those are three players already. There was more players out than that, but those are three players that you
Mm.
would sort of regard as starters, or at least one of the key players in the team. So it's impressive to see how well we're doing with the amount of players that we've got out injured, but we've got Chelsea in the next round. So we've got Chelsea in the next round of the FA Youth Cup. So I've got a feeling we're going to need those players back for that game, because Chelsea are obviously going to be a much tougher test. But I just wanted to touch on Chido's performance. So if
Yeah.
people have got the time, if people are able to, I actually put together a match compilation of Chido's performance. So I put together sort of
Cool.
all his key moments. Now, usually when I make compilations on social media, I always tend to include mistakes. So I like to do that with academy players, because I think it adds a bit of realism to perhaps the performance, because I think
Right.
sometimes you can get misled by compilations sometimes, and you obviously only see the good bits and never the bad bits. But what was quite striking to me when I put together the video. There was only really 3 occasions in the whole game across the 90 minutes that Chido played where I was like, I would maybe class that as a mistake. It was just kind of like a
Mm,
50-50 that he lost. It
right.
wasn't necessarily like a bad pass or a bad touch or something like that, or a bad decision. So that's something that was really struck out to me, was sort of the polishness of the performance, if that makes sense, how polished it was.
Yeah.
And I brought some stats with me today because I think it's a really good sort of addition to the point that I'm going to make now. So across the season, these are his stats so far. Okay, so in terms of breaking down who he's played and what he's done in those games, and this is for under 18s football only. Okay, so his first game he played 30 minutes against Sunderland, no goals, no assists. Okay, that was his first game for the club. His second game he played 45 minutes against Forest. He scored 3 goals in 45 minutes with no assists. The following game, 29 minutes against Leeds, no goals, 1 assist. 71 minutes against Everton, 1 goal, no assists. 72 minutes against Leeds, 1 goal, no assists. 76 minutes versus Stoke, 1 goal, no assists. 72 minutes versus Coventry, 2 goals, no assists. 90 minutes versus Preston, 2 goals, no assists. So he's scoring pretty frequently, right?
Mm,
At under
yeah.
18s level, he's showing that same kind of dominance that he did at Arsenal. And I don't know if you were aware of this, James, but when he scored against Stoke, so that game that he scored against Stoke, he actually became the under 18s record goal scorer. So
I did
between
hear that.
the years of
Yeah.
2000, so between the years of 2016 to 2024, Chido is sort of the record goal scorer. He scored 37 goals in 23 games, and he's looking at a goal every 45 minutes under 18s level. Now, the list that he's involved with, so sort of the top 10 of sort of the top 10 goal scorers under 18s level, he's not in a steam company. So
Mm,
I sort of had a look at the list, and the players that are there, they're not necessarily sort of big hitters in the Prem at the moment or anything like that.
right.
But the minutes per goal ratio is so much better than the other players that it kind of
Mm,
just sets him completely apart from the rest of the
right.
players. And the reason I wanted to talk about kind of how dominant he is in under 18s football, sort of for us and for Arsenal, is kind of pushing into this narrative of why is he still playing under 18s football? Because I think that's a question that a lot of
Mhm.
people have got at the moment, and it's a valid question, right? If he's scoring near enough in every game, for both Arsenal and us, why is he still playing under 18s football? He's a massive player, right? He's 6'4", I would say, physically dominant,
Yeah,
and like I
I
said,
think
he's
that's about it.
scoring at
Yep.
he's scoring at a crazy rate. And I kind of got caught up into this thought process as well. Was sort of wondering, why is he still playing for the under 18s? He should be moved up by now. But I've had to think about it, and I've come to the sort of conclusion that they're keeping him at that level for the time being because it's best for his overall game. I
Mhm.
think sometimes if you factor in his size and how strong he is physically and how good he is at finishing, I think sometimes you can equate goals to development sometimes. If someone's scoring
Yeah.
so many goals, that mean that they're better than everyone, so they have to be moved up. But that doesn't necessarily always that's not always the case. And I think in Chido's
Mm,
case, I think the club are looking to perhaps develop his overall game. And I think the under 18s environment is a perfect sort of place for that because he's playing against players that are smaller than him and obviously not as physical. And if you want to work on your sort of back to goal kind of game and
right,
your
right.
techniques and your creativity and that kind of you're leaning into that side of the game. I think under 18s football is a really good opportunity for that because, like I said, the pressure to perform is obviously higher up the more you go up, and I just think the environment for under 18s football is much better for that sort of overall game for his overall game to develop. I think when you move up the levels, your sort of the requirement for you to be um, the player that you're meant to be is sort of there.
Mm,
And um, like I said, with under 18s football, there's a bit more sort of leeway in terms of your performances and stuff like that. So I think that's what the club's doing. That's my projection, is that the club wants him to develop his overall game before he moves up. Because I remember Alejandro Garnacho, the under 18s, he had a lot of areas of his game that he needed to focus on. And he was doing really well at the time for under 18s. He was scoring a lot of goals, but his overall game wasn't really polished. And I remember an interview that one of his coaches at under 18s football, his name was Justin Cochrane.
Yep.
He said that for like a month period, they focused on Garnacho only being allowed to shoot with his left foot, and he wasn't allowed to cut inside. And I'm not sure whether or not you'd be afforded that kind of leeway in 21s football as you would with under 18s football.
Mm.
So I think we're in this scenario where, like I said, the club want Chido to develop his overall game so that when he comes into the first team, he hasn't missed those coaching opportunities. If you get what I'm trying to
Yes.
say. Um, and the thing that stuck out to me in that game against Preston was sort of that how polished his game was. I was really, really impressed. It's definitely the best game that I've seen for him so far. His back to play goal and some of the through balls that he was playing in was really, really impressive. And he's never going to be that Harry Kane type of player. I think that's
Sure.
important for everyone to know. He's never going to be that creative striker. He's a big number 9 that wants to get goals, and that's kind of what he's there for. But what he showed, like I said, what he showed in that game against Preston was sort of areas of his game that are really, really sort of a bright
You
spark,
still have
right?
to have, yeah, in
Um,
addition to just scoring
yeah,
goals, as a
yeah,
more
exactly,
complete
and
striker, yeah.
yeah, because he needs to become that because you can't be this striker that's simply reliant on service.
Yep.
And I think we're seeing that a little bit now with Hoyland, right? His
Yeah.
overall game quite
Yep.
isn't there, and he's sort of reliant on that ball to be played into him, through balls for the finishes, the one-on-one finishes. So it's good to see him develop that side of the game because he needs to be a striker that's not reliant on the team service. And I've just finished watching him play for the 21s against Nigeriland, I think their name is, a Norwegian team.
Yep.
And again, the service was quite sort of limited in that game, but he's come away with a goal. The game's not finished yet, but he's come away with a goal,
Yeah.
and he had about 2 or 3 other chances to score as well. And perhaps on another day, he bags a hat trick in that game, and they weren't necessarily chances that the team created for him. He's sort of creating chances for himself. So it's really, really positive to see that, and just really, really excited about his development because you're sort of seeing this progression.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of sort of academy fans, if you were to speak to them, would agree with me on that. Is that I'm not trying to get too carried away. I'm not trying to say that he's the complete player and that he needs to play in the first team next week. But we're definitely seeing that slow progression where I think when he came from Arsenal, there was a lot of gaps in his game, and he's starting to polish those up. So really, really happy to see that.
Yeah, that's definitely very interesting, and as to your point on a couple of things with like the goal scoring record and things like that, just for some perspective, right? I think one of the reasons players who are really good very often don't spend too long at the lower levels. So the
Yeah.
guys who get like these goal records are tend to be players who've played there a long time. Now, as you mentioned in
Mm.
Cheeto's case, it's his goals per minute is super high. So like well
Yeah.
above all these
45
other guys. Right. So he's
at the
scoring,
time.
yeah, so it's like the other players who are at the top of these lists have probably spent a lot more time at that level than he has as of yet to reach those numbers, but he's reached it so fast. But that would be why, because I mean, we've seen interesting things in the past, right? Like just for a level on this, like I think I remember hearing things about Charlie McNeil when he came from over from City, right? About his numbers like out of control, and
He's on the
obviously,
list. He's on the
yeah, so
list.
there you go, right? Right, he should be right, but obviously, like
He's
he's a good,
10th.
he's a good. It hasn't, yeah, it didn't. He didn't come through and blow the world up and come forward and get into the first team for us, um, and but regardless, that doesn't mean Cheeto won't, because I think that if that
Mm.
amount per minute goal ratio is obviously very important. But I also think it is a really interesting point you make about this thing on development of their overall game, right? Because you make the comparison like to Hoyland, you mentioned specifically Garnacho and stuff, and we can see that these are players where they come to the senior level maybe too early. They're relied upon
Mm.
too much, right? And then it diminishes their progression. Like Garnacho these days, if you look at most of the critiques of him, it's because he's become maybe over reliant on his main course of action of dribble, cut in, shoot right-footed
Yeah.
versus,
Yeah.
like you said, that specific thing about training on the left foot, on not cutting in. But when you're under a lot of pressure against, he's better with his right and he's better cutting in. So against better players, when
Mm.
the pressure is on, he's going to naturally, divert to that. And this is the issue with young players, even at the senior level, when they come up not too quickly, but where you need too much out of them and the expectations are too high and you're too reliant on them, that they don't get the chance to round their game out. So it seems like, at the youth level, they're doing a good job of focusing on that.
Yeah, I think there's an expectation at first team level that sort of if you're there, you're kind of ready. I
You're
don't I
done.
don't think
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
first team level there's much coaching. I think the sort of
Yeah.
expectation is that sort of you're there to train, to understand the sort of setup of the team, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what's expected of you. There's not necessarily much training going on there.
Yes.
I could be wrong on that, but that's sort of my
No, you are
perception based on the
correct.
people that
There's
I
not a
speak
lot
to.
of
Is that
time.
yeah,
They get a couple of days of tactical and
yeah,
fitness work, and that's it at most. Yeah.
yeah. So to keep him down at that, I fully expect Chido to start moving up to the 21 slowly. He's played obviously tonight. Um, I think that
Yeah.
will come in time. But like I said, I just think they're keeping him at that level now. They'll be happy for him to keep on scoring, but just sort of adding that bit of nuance to people perhaps who were
Yes. Makes
wondering
sense.
why he's kept it. I think it's just develop his game. And you mentioned Charlie McNeil. So he's actually 10th on the under 18s record scorers. So Cheetah's first, right?
Yes.
Charlie's 10th. So Charlie played 32 games and scored 29 goals. Cheetah's played 23 games and scored 37 goals.
Wow.
And with Charlie, Charlie was an excellent finisher, as is Cheeto. But Charlie doesn't quite have like that physical profile that Cheeto does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think from what I've seen so far, Cheeto's got a bit more to his game in terms of the hold up play, the link up play, things like that, the ability to run in behind, that kind of stuff. Whereas Charlie was a bit more reliant on the service of the team. And you noticed that as he progressed to the 21s, the service wasn't there that he had at the under 18s. And if you
Yeah.
go and look at his goal record for the under 18s versus 21s, it's quite stark. The difference is quite stark. He scored a considerable amount of goals less for the 21s than he did for the under 18s.
Yep.
And I think that's down to the environment that he was on into the team, because he's not able to create the chances because his
Sure.
skill set wasn't sort of for that. Whereas I'm seeing tonight, I'm seeing last weekend, I'm seeing the weekend before that, Cheeto's showing me sort of scenarios where he's creating chances for himself, which is really promising.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'm definitely glad to hear that. In terms of because I know we want to talk about Kone and we will in a minute. In terms of
Yeah.
the under 18s and some of the other players, there's a couple of people you mentioned in the last one to look out for as well. I saw a lot of commentary around, Jack Fletcher. I think had a good game there, had some good moments in that. I think he was involved in creating the first goal for Cheeto and
Yeah, it was.
some good play. How was that?
Yeah, it was actually Tyler Fletcher that I mentioned on the video.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I get them mixed up.
but
Obviously,
but
that's
yeah, it's okay. But Jack is very talented as well.
Cool.
He's kind of got like that Cole Palmer kind of play style. He's not the
Okay.
quickest player, but he's very, very creative. He's remember I talked to you last week about Shea Lacey, where
Yeah.
he'll do something on a pitch that you don't think that anyone else can, and Jack's kind of got that a little bit in his game, the
Okay.
sort of through balls that he'll play. But
Yeah.
he's a bit like Bruno in the sense that when he gets the ball, he's looking to release it straight away. He's not
Mm.
really a ball
Mm.
carrier,
Sure.
and dribbling sort of with the ball isn't necessarily his strength. So that's one thing that I'd like to see him work on. Is he's got the ability that when he gets that ball and look up, he's able to play those passes. But I think to sort of round off his game a little bit, I'd like to see him
Makes
try
sense.
and run with the ball a bit more. And we saw that for one of the goals that he actually set up for Chido in the game in the under 18s. He ran through a big space, and that's I've not really seen much of that from him, and it was really, really good to see, because I was like, right, I'm not, this, I want to see more of this, right? Because he cut through like 3 or 4 players, and his shot was blocked, and Cheeto sort of mopped it up, right? Yeah, I
Nice.
was impressed by Jack Fletcher. Tyler Fletcher was solid as well, but Tyler's one of those ones where I'm saying one to look out for just because I like his profile. I think he's
Sure.
got a lot of things that I like. that's not me saying that he's going to make the first team or anything like that, yeah, anytime soon. I just really like him as a sort of academy footballer. And then I think it was Thwaite I mentioned, wasn't it? He came
Yes,
on
yes.
for sort of some brief minutes. He didn't really play much in that game, so nothing to really report back on there. But yeah, throughout the course of the season, definitely keep an eye on him.
Nice. Okay. Was there anybody else that you wanted to note from the weekend before we move on to Kone?
No, no, that's fine. I think we
Cool.
can move on to Kone.
All right. So yeah, let's get into that because obviously it was good to see him back from injury. Is he?
Yeah,
I think he looked. I watched it and he had looked quite bright in the bit that we did see, the very small bits that we did
yeah.
see. What do you
So it's
think so
the
far?
it's the first time that I've been able to watch him televised since the game that he was injured. So he got injured in
Yes.
November. And the thing that struck out to me in the game in November was he started really, really well.
Mhm.
Very sharp on the ball, was playing a lot of forward passes, and he started really well. And as the game kind of went on, he became really, really sloppy. He lost the ball quite a few
Mm.
times, kept on slipping, and sort of doing that thing where when you slip and lose the ball and chase your touch. He was doing that quite a lot, and
Yeah.
that's what ended up getting him injured. Was that he sort of
Interesting.
miscontrolled the ball, was stretching for it, and then got injured that way. So, but what I mentioned on one of the videos that I did on my channel was I'm willing to look past stuff like that because for me, I put that down to just match
Yeah.
sharpness,
Yep.
and it not being a case of ability for him, because in those bright moments that he showed, that's kind of what I'm expecting to see more often when he's fully fit. Um,
Yep.
and I'm willing to look past those kind of you know slipping and miscontrolling the ball because I think that was more of a case of that he hadn't played many games.
Yep.
Um, but the game tonight that I've watched him play tonight for 21s again, um, solid, nothing special, but a lot sharper and cleaner in his actions. So a lot less mistakes. And I think he'll have been playing behind closed doors friendlies for the 21s. He obviously
Sure.
played on the weekend, and he's played again tonight. So that match sharpness is starting to come up, and that the sort of the stamina is going to be there. But yeah, he's one that I'm quite excited for. And did you watch him during the under 17s World Cup?
I didn't. I
Did you
watched some. I
manage to
saw
catch
some
any of those
highlights
games?
after they,
Yeah,
after we were going to sign him. I was able to go back and look at some stuff, which was quite interesting.
yeah.
But
He was one of the key performers for Mali in that tournament.
yeah,
And do you? I just thought it'd be quite interesting. Do you want me to sort of explain to the viewers perhaps how we secured that transfer? I think it'd be quite
yeah,
interesting to
I
talk
I
about
do. I
some
think people
information
would
that I
be
got.
definitely. Yeah, I think people would be very
Yeah.
interested in hearing that for sure. Go ahead.
So I did do an article about this at the time, but not many people have seen it. And I did mention it on my video. So we actually started scouting him before the World Cup. So that was kind of
Mhm.
like his breakout, where everyone was like, "Wow, this is a good talent." But there's a tournament in France that's sort of biannual, and what happens is a lot of African teams go over to France and play in this tournament. That's why you see a lot of sort of African players in France, right? There's a
Yeah,
lot of
makes sense. Yeah,
transfers from African clubs into French clubs. And fortunately, one of our scouts were there for that tournament and sort of saw Kone and sort of like what they saw. We got in touch with his Malian club and asked for a trial, but they rejected it.
Hmm.
So the club kept track of sort of how he was doing, and then obviously the World Cup came around, and he played really, really well there. And I think that was the moment where the club felt that they needed to act, because I think you've mentioned it before in videos. I think Brighton and Ajax are both involved. I can't confirm that myself, but I know that from looking at reports, other clubs started a circle at that point, and the club felt then they needed to act. And what the source that told me all this information said was is that this wasn't necessarily like an Ineos led sort of signing.
sure,
It was Ineos's involvement helped get the signing.
sure. That
I
makes
think
sense.
we all kind of know that United scouting recently, especially for young players, has been excellent. I think we've
Yeah,
identified
yeah.
loads of talented players over the years, just not acted on them.
Yes,
And I think
yes, exactly. Yeah,
what the source informed me of was that Ineos being there helped sort of and be proactive on the move. So that's
Like,
really good
let's
to hear.
actually do
And
it and
and
get these things done. Yeah.
yeah, and that person did mention to me then, this was like 3 or 4 months ago now, I think it was. They did mention to me that we wanted to do a similar type of signing to Kone at the time. Didn't extend any information as to what that was. Didn't say what position, what, anything like that. They just said that
Mm,
they wanted to, Ineos wanted to do a similar type signing in January. And I'm assuming that Leon was that signing. I don't know.
could
I
be.
haven't
Yeah.
been able to
True.
confirm that with a person. But yeah, just wanted to sort of talk about that, sort of how the move kind of happened. But I think tonight showed that he's not ready for the first team, and I think the games that I've seen him, he's not ready for the first team. But there's definitely a lot of tools to work with there.
Yeah.
Um, I was watching it. I was watching him tonight. He was quite comfortable in picking the ball up from the centre backs and the goalkeeper, and looked quite press resistant. Was playing quite a few nice passes through the lines, and very very good ground coverage defensively. Really really good
Good. Yeah.
engine, and I
Yeah.
think we'll see more of that as he plays more. It's just a shame that the other games that he's played in we've not been able to see, but
Yeah.
definitely like what I see. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to ask you just on that note, because a lot of people haven't watched much of him, is what type of player he is. Because United, especially as in the first team, it's like some of the reasons we look at it and think, myself included on this, okay, where I think I like to see him getting into the first team, even maybe when he's
yeah,
not totally ready yet, is because we've how long has it been that we've just been completely lacking in profiles in the midfield, in the first team for such a
yeah,
long time, and I look at him and I think, a player who good ground coverage defensively, has the legs, can carry
mm,
the ball, is kind of a bit of an all-rounder in that respect, is comfortable on it, but also defensively good off of it. Ugarte is doing well for us right now in a lot of these things, but he's like we saw how bad it was without him, in a few
yeah,
games recently in terms of depth, and Collier's come in and done a nice job there. But
yeah,
we've done the merry round on really limited midfielders, right, over the years, or the ones we've gotten like Nemanja Matic, who have that overall great skill set, were at the end of
mm,
their careers, and not
rare
able to,
profiles.
yeah, very, very hard to find, but also at the
Mm.
end. And it's like, it's been a long, long time. I mean, since
Yeah,
Carrick and
it's a
such, that we've
minute
had these like
yeah, it's a minute detail, but he's been playing with number 6 on the back of his shirt. So
oh, sure.
it's a minute detail, but it's suggesting the position that, he's not playing as a number 8, going up and down the
Right.
pitch.
Yeah.
He's sort of there as the anchor.
Yep.
Um, I From the little that I've seen, he reminds me a bit of Kante in the sense that he's one of those players that he can do the defensive work, and that's what he's in the team for in terms of off the ball.
Yeah.
Very, very, very good at pressing. Like I said, covering the ground. But like Kante was one of those players that everyone thought he was like a defensive midfield player, but he was actually very good box to box as well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Kone showed that in the World Cup, in the under-17s World Cup, that he can play going forward as well. Not seen that so far, but like I said, I've watched him for 2 games, so the sample size is really really small. So I have to like factor that in. But he definitely looks like one of those players that's going to be like um, picking the ball up from the centre backs, driving with
Mm,
it, playing through balls. Nice reverse passes. And that's what I've been seeing tonight. And potentially being able to get involved in the final third as well, potentially. But one thing I noticed tonight, like I said, just going back to it, was the energy levels and how fit he looked.
good.
And sort of like the intensity of how he was running across the pitch. I noticed that tonight was really, really good, which what I didn't see in that game in November. Like I said, he started to become really sloppy and looked a bit lethargic, and like I said, chasing his touch quite a lot. But like I said, he really hadn't played much football at that point. So one to keep an eye on, I think. And it's going to be hard because a lot of the 21s games aren't televised these days, which is a
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah.
Like tonight's game wasn't on MUTV. I had to get up a stream on YouTube from
Yep. The other
Norgeland's
club. Yeah.
profile. So it's going to be a tough one to sort of assess where he's at. I think I'm right in saying again he's not really trained with the first team, right? Or not? Or he trained once, isn't he? He's trained once. I think he was
Yeah.
pictured once for the first team.
Yeah. I think the
But
goal would be to get him kind of kind of like Kokonki, where he's like maybe training with them but playing for the under-21s type of thing by the
Yeah,
end of the year.
I think
But
we'll get.
that's
I think
normal.
we'll get
Yeah,
there. Yeah, I
yeah,
think we'll get there. Like I said, these types of signings, and as you know, these types of signings, they're not meant for him to be playing for the 21s for ages and to just
yeah,
keep him
correct.
down there. They want, they sign these players because they want to move them up and
Yep.
they trust that they're good enough and they don't need that same level of coaching and environment that perhaps the other players
It's
do
more
that
like
we have,
settling,
homegrown
right?
players.
And getting into the
Yeah,
groove of things more than it is like
absolutely.
coaching. Yeah, makes
Absolutely. But
sense.
to come into that midfield at the age he's at and sort of the
Yeah.
inexperience is such a huge task that the the club environment needs to be better first, doesn't it? And I think
Yes.
we're at a stage now where in the season we're coming to a point where we're not going to be afforded those games to perhaps bring in the players to help them
Yeah. Not a lot of
come
free
into the
hits,
first
huh?
team.
Yep.
No, like we're sort of coming to a point in the Europa League where we're not going to get easy games now. Um, the FA Cup, that potentially is an opportunity, but you know,
You
I
know,
think
it's
the
what's
only
funny
way
that the Premier League in a funny way, like obviously
I was
it's
about to
like you
say
don't want
that,
to be relegated, right? But like we're probably
yeah,
top four is probably a distant dream. We're coming to that, right? But you come mid-March, you're 15, 20 points off of relegation. It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen anyway, but we're well clear, but you're kind of solidified in like we're gonna finish between, seventh and 12th. And we're going to chase the Champions League via Europa or Europa League via the FA Cup. And that's where our focus is. There might be a number of games that are in some ways kind of that free hit of just, let's use this for development.
yeah. I think I was about to say exactly what you're going to say. You're spot on. I think oddly enough, the Premier League could be an opportunity to bring in young players, which sounds crazy. But you're right. If there's no risk, like you said, there's no risk of relegation. There's no chance of us, getting into Europe. I think that I don't want to call them dead rubber games, but they're going to be chances, perhaps at Old Trafford against a lower
Yeah.
sort of team that's lower in the league with 10, 15 minutes to go. Why not? There's not much to lose. So I think we could see a scenario like that towards the end of the season. Like I said, I do think that we will see Chido debut by the end of the season. And perhaps Kone too, towards the end of the season.
Yep.
Like I said, when there's not much to play for, potentially those two could, and Kokonki as well, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. All right. Well, yeah, this is a good recap. Obviously, I don't know what their schedule is, but I assume there's more games upcoming over the next bit of
Yeah,
time.
the under 18s are playing Wolves on the weekend, on Saturday.
Okay.
That's always a tough game. We're playing them away. Like I said, that's always a tough game. We always not struggle there, but it's Wolves have got a good academy. And um, like I said last week, we're 2 games in hand on City. So City are above us at the moment. We've played 10 games, won all 10. So we're on 30 points, and City, I believe, are on 32 with 12 games
Okay.
played. So hopefully we can get a win there and go top of the table again.
Nice.
Because I mean, I don't know how much you know about City's academy, but they look really really strong. I think we need
Yeah.
to.
I
I
mean,
think I don't want to say we need to win every single game to win the league this year, but City's under 18s are really really strong this year, and they've spent a lot of money recruiting for that age group. If you actually looked at their FA Youth Cup game that they just played recently,
mm,
and 4 out of their front 6 have been signed from other clubs in the last year or two.
oh,
And these are like top talent. So I think we play them. I don't quote me on this, but I think I just checked earlier on. I think we play them last game of the season at home.
oh
I
wow,
I
could be
hope I'm right in
huge,
saying
right?
that because I should know this. I should know this. But I'm just wondering, could that be a title decider towards the end of the season?
Yeah, that'd
Who
be wild.
knows? But yeah,
Cool. Okay, well then, yeah, we'll see what happens this weekend. We'll see if there's any surprises in any of that. We'll see if anything relevant to the first team and the January market ties into anything, and then we'll see if we're gonna check back in next week on anything else. But well, then we're gonna leave it there and end it. So thanks for coming on again, and thanks to everybody watching. you've enjoyed it. If you have any specific questions or topics you'd like, us to cover in another one, definitely you can leave that in the comments. But otherwise, it's been good. Thanks for coming back, man.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one, everyone. See you later.